If you follow education rankings here in the US, you've probably noticed a pattern. There's one state that just seems to always be sitting right at the top of the list. So, in this explainer, we're going to unpack the data and figure out what's really going on. Why has Massachusetts earned this incredible reputation as the nation's leader in education?
And I'm not just talking about one study or a single good year. Nope. Across a whole range of different metrics from all sorts of sources, Massachusetts consistently, year after year, lands in that #1 spot for its school systems and its highly educated population.
And this isn't even a close race. A really deep analysis by WalletHub. And they look at everything. Test scores, degrees, the whole shebang. They confirmed it. To put it simply, Massachusetts is the most educated state in America. Period. So, how did they get here? That's the big question. Here's what we're going to cover. We'll look at their amazing report card, dig into their culture of educational achievement, and see what's actually happening inside their schools. Then we'll see how they stack up globally, look at some new challenges they're facing, and finally, break down the Massachusetts blueprint for success. Okay, let's just dive right in by looking at the sheer dominance of their performance. Seriously, the state's report card is truly in a class of its own. The consistency here is what's just staggering. It's not one thing. They're #1 in how educated their citizens are. They're #1 in the quality of their schools. They've been named the best school system for 3 years in a row. And if that wasn't enough, they also have top scores on national tests and college entrance exams. It's just total excellence across the board. So, where does all this success come from? Well, it doesn't just magically start in kindergarten. It's actually built on a really strong foundation, an incredibly well-educated adult population that sets a super high bar for the next generation. It all starts with the basics, right? Well, at 96.1%, Massachusetts has the highest percentage of adults with a high school diploma in the whole country. That's a full 6 points higher than the national average. This is really the first rung on that ladder of achievement. And from there, the gap just gets wider, a lot wider. Get this, more than half of all adults in Massachusetts have a bachelor's degree. That's a staggering 15-point lead over the US average, and, you guessed it, another #1 ranking. And this right here, this is kind of the top of the mountain. The state also has the highest percentage of people with graduate or professional degrees. We're talking master's degrees, PhDs, doctorates, over 26%. It shows just how deep this culture of education runs. Okay, so we see this highly educated population, but how is the K-12 system actually producing these results? What's happening inside the schools that makes them such a national powerhouse? Let's take a look. This is from what's often called the nation's report card. And in 2024, Massachusetts didn't just win, they won everything. Their students got the highest scores of any state in all 4 core categories. It was a complete and total sweep. And, amazing academic results like that don't happen in a vacuum. It turns out a huge piece of the puzzle is safety. It makes sense, right? Massachusetts schools have some of the lowest rates of threats and fights in the country, which means students and teachers can actually focus on, learning. And what about the teachers? What's this big number? Well, that's the average teacher salary in Massachusetts. It's one of the highest in the entire nation. And that's not an accident. It's a clear strategy. If you want to attract and keep the best teachers, you've got to invest in them. Okay, so being #1 in the US is one thing. That's a very big deal. But what happens when you zoom out and put them on the world stage? This is where the story gets really, really interesting. So yeah, the big question is, how do they stack up against other countries? Let's just imagine for a second that Massachusetts wasn't a state, but its own nation. How would its students do? Well, the results are pretty eye-opening. So these are the PISA results. It's this big international test for 15-year-olds all around the globe. And the difference is just night and day. Look at the US as a whole, kind of stuck there in the middle of the pack, right? But Massachusetts students, they're #1 in the world in reading, second in science. They're not just the best in America, they are genuinely world-class. But it's not a perfect story. The last few years have thrown a huge wrench into the works for everyone. And it turns out that even the top-ranked state in the nation wasn't immune to the challenges. Yep, the pandemic really did change everything. All that disruption to in-person learning created some really deep academic challenges that even a powerhouse like Massachusetts is still trying to overcome. New research from Harvard and Stanford gives us this kind of mixed picture. In math, there's some good news. Students are starting to bounce back. They've gained back some ground. But look at reading. Yikes. The problem has actually gotten worse. Students have fallen further behind and are now almost half a grade level below where they were pre-pandemic. And this isn't just a problem in a few places. We're talking about the vast majority of students. Over 80% of them are in school districts that are still behind 2019 levels in both math and reading. So the recovery, well, it's got a long way to go. So, even with all these new challenges, let's get back to the main question. What's the long-term formula? What is the secret sauce that put Massachusetts at the top for so long and kept them there? What's the blueprint? It really seems to boil down to these four big things. First, they have tough academic standards, and they've been sticking to them for decades. Second, they put their money where their mouth is, with one of the highest per-student funding rates in the country. Third, like we saw, they make school safety a priority. And fourth, they support their teachers with good pay. It's a powerful combination. And at the end of the day, it's not just about policy and numbers. Governor Maura Healey really hits the nail on the head here. It takes a village, right? This kind of success is about everyone. The students, their families, the teachers, the administrators, all pulling together in the same direction. Which leaves us with this one final, really big question. Is this Massachusetts miracle, this combination of high standards, big investment, and a culture of achievement, something that other states can actually copy? Or is it just a one-off, a unique exception born from a perfect storm of history and culture that can't be repeated? That really is the multi-billion-dollar question for the rest of the country.